So welcome to the Data Explorers Market Update with me, Will Duff Gordon. So brace yourself, because I'm going to talk now about what securities lending and borrowing data has to say about the Middle East and North Africa. Not somewhere where we often roam, but we're going to roam there because on the 11th of November we have our second Dubai conference hosted by Steve Sedgwick and lots of the key power players in the region coming along to that. So what do institutional investors, what are they doing in this region? Well, at the moment there's something like 35 times more supply of shares to borrow than there is demand to borrow them. When we look at the United Arab Emirates, and then we look at Jordan, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Israel, all these countries. I mean, Israel's slightly different. They have a much more liquid equity market. But as a whole, there's 35 times more supply than demand. And quite interestingly, that supply increased quite a lot in June this year, particularly in the Israeli stocks. And I wonder why people suddenly went much more long. The international investors, anyway, went much more long Israeli stocks at about that time. And there are 3 companies in my report that I've mentioned that saw an influx of sort of foreign institutional investment, which is quite interesting. Is there much short selling in this region? Well, no, there isn't. It's pretty low. I mean, we have seen some demand to borrow sort of flickering at certain moments, but right now nothing's really catching the eye. We can also see that if we look at the statistics on average, about 1% of one of the sort of 300 companies we looked at in this region, about 1% of those companies' shares are held by funds who lend, against whatever it is, 20–30% if you're looking at the UK and the US, with like 0.03% of those companies typically short versus about 3% typically in the US. So that's just trying to put some context around here. We've heard that the Abu Dhabi exchange are sort of agitating and hustling for the UAE to introduce short selling to then enable the MSCI to include the UAE in its list of emerging markets rather than frontier markets, which has a big sort of bearing on the types of international investors who may be keen to buy some shares here. And that leads me neatly onto the subject of sort of ETFs, which I just talked about yesterday. If me as an investor wants to get exposure to, for instance, all those people in the Middle East and North Africa who are rapidly buying mobile phones, presuming that's the case, I imagine it is, am I going to be kind of converting my pounds into variety of different local currencies and then buying the local mobile company on the local exchange? What would be very easy would be to have an ETF with a basket of MENA telecommunications companies. But sadly, we're not there yet. They do not seem to exist, and I can't find any ETFs that have any real exposure to Middle East and North Africa, and that may well change soon. So we're going to keep watching this area. If you'd like to read my report, it is at dataexplorers.com/news.